What's up, guys? I'm back here with Book 1 of the Ranger's Apprentice The Early Years series, The Tournament at Gorlan. Today we're in Chapter 16, so let's go ahead and get into it. King Oswald looked up as the door to his chamber was flung open, slamming back against the wall, then rebounding with the violence of the movement. He frowned. There had been no preliminary knock, no waiting for permission to enter, as might be expected of someone entering the presence of the king. Instead, Morgarath simply strode into the room, his attitude and expression showing all too clearly that he regarded this as an unwanted interruption to his day. "You wanted to see me?" he said brusquely. Oswald bit back an angry reply. There was no point in antagonizing the Baron of Gorlan, he knew. And in truth, he found Morgarath to be a rather intimidating figure. He seemed to dominate any room he entered, filling it with a dark energy. In part, that was because of his physical presence. He was a tall, powerful figure of a man. But there was more. There was a sense of self-assurance about him. Self-assurance that bordered on arrogance. No matter whom Morgarath was speaking to, commoner or king, there was an underlying note of contempt and impatience, as was witnessed by his abrupt entrance and question. Oswald took a deep breath. He wanted to be calm, and above all, he wanted to make sure his voice didn't tremble. It angered him that he should feel this way. He was, after all, the king of Erluin, but he couldn't help it. Morgarath created this sense of uncertainty and inadequacy. "I'm worried about my son," he said finally. Morgarath allowed himself a contemptuous snort. "So you should be," he replied. "He's killing and stealing in the northern part of the kingdom. He's alienating the common people, and he's antagonizing the Scotti with his forays across the border." Oswald shook his head. "It's just so unlike Duncan," he said. "I can't believe that he would suddenly start behaving this way. He's always had a good relationship with our subjects." Morgarath hid a scornful smile. That was precisely why he had instigated the program of stealing and raiding being carried out by a man named Tiller, who was impersonating Duncan. If Morgarath's plan were to succeed, he needed to destroy the affection that the prince's subjects felt for him. He needed the common people to hate and fear the prince. "People change," he said flatly. But Oswald continued to demur. "Not Duncan," he said. "He's a good man. Always has been." "Is this the same good man?" Morgarath laid sarcastic emphasis on the two words. "Who tried to assassinate you only a few months ago? Or did that poison find its way into your wine by accident?" "I've been thinking about that," Oswald replied. "The more I do, the more I think it was a mistake. Why would Duncan want to kill me?" "Because," Morgarath said, speaking slowly and distinctly, as if to a not too bright child, "he wants you out of the way so he can be king." "I can't believe it," Oswald said stubbornly. "Now I look at it, I think I acted hastily in letting you persuade me to move here to Castle Gorlan." Morgarath shook his head. "I can protect you here," he said. "At Castle Erluin, you were at risk. If Duncan had made another attempt on your life, he might well have succeeded. After all, he has freedom of movement at Castle Erluin that he doesn't enjoy here, and he undoubtedly has cronies among the castle staff who would have assisted him in another attempt. It'd be far easier for him to put a dagger in your heart there than he could manage here, with my men constantly on the alert." "I don't believe it," Oswald said. I can produce witnesses to swear that he was behind the attempt, Morgarath replied. In truth, he could bring witnesses to swear that the sun rose in the west, if it suited his purpose. But Oswald drew himself up and asserted himself. Witnesses can be bribed to lie. Morgarath's eyes narrowed. Are you saying that I lied, Oswald? He challenged. The lack of any title before the king's name was an obvious pointer to his anger. Oswald swallowed angrily. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to give in. But he knew there was no future in accusing Morgarath. He was alone in Castle Gorlan. None of his retainers had been allowed to accompany him. For his own safety, Morgarath had insisted. Oswald was all too aware of the uncertainty of his position. Effectively, he was powerless here, even though he might be king. At Castle Gorlan, Morgarath's rule was absolute, and Oswald knew he needed to keep the Baron's goodwill. The fact might gall him, but it was incontrovertible. No, not at all. But other people, who wanted to mislead you, may well be doing so. Morgarath noted the king's retreat with satisfaction. Oswald's next words, however, rapidly dismissed the feeling. That's why I've decided I need to confront Duncan myself, Oswald said, a note of determination creeping into his voice. Confront him? To what purpose? I need to hear his version of events from his own lips. I know my son. I trust him. I'm sure there's a good explanation for all this, the poison in the wine, and the raiding across the border. I want to accuse him face to face and hear what he has to say. If he lies to me, I'll know. But I want to give him the chance to defend himself. Morgarath shook his head, expelling his breath in a long hiss. Oswald continued, ignoring the man's obvious disdain for his words. It's what I should have done in the first place, he said heatedly. Now that things were out in the open, he was gaining in confidence. What kind of king goes scuttling off to hide in someone else's castle when there's a hint of trouble? One who wants to stay alive, said Morgarath sarcastically. But Oswald was shaking his head, and Morgarath felt anger mounting inside him. So the royal worm is turning, he thought. He wondered how long it would be before they reached this point. A king has to take chances, Oswald said, and he has to trust his own judgment. That's why he is king. I'm sorry, Morgarath. I mean you no offense, but it's time I took charge of things, and started behaving like the king of Ereluen. I appreciate your concern for me, but I can't hide behind your walls any longer. You pompous fool, Morgarath thought, but he assumed a winning smile as he seemed to consider the king's words. Morgarath could charm a snake out of its skin if he wished, as an old saying went. And exactly what do you have in mind, your majesty? I want you to send to Castle Ereluen for a company of my guard. Then I'll ride north with them to confront Duncan and settle this matter once and for all. So you'll simply find Duncan and say, "Stop all this killing and stealing, you've been a bad boy"? Is that the plan? Oswald hid his anger at the obvious sarcasm. He nodded once. That's about it, he said. It's time for me to start acting like a king. Morgarath paced around the room for some moments. He stopped at the window, looking down on the green parkland that stretched out below the castle. It was time to stop the pretense, he realized. He turned back to Oswald, who was waiting expectantly for his answer. I'm afraid the time for that is long gone, Oswald, he said. The king took a step back, startled by the contempt in the man's voice. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "I'm saying your time to act like the king is long gone. Your time as king is long gone. You're going to disinherit your son in my favor. You're going to name me as your heir, and as regent for the immediate future." "How dare you!" Oswald exploded. "What makes you think I'd agree to such a threat?" "Several things," Morgarath said in a silky tone. "For one, you're all alone here, and I can make you do anything I want to. And secondly, your son isn't in the border country, raiding villages and stealing cattle from the Scotty." Oswald felt a cold hand of fear clutching his heart. As Morgarath continued, the grip grew tighter. "Duncan, your oh-so-noble son, is currently being held prisoner by one of my followers. And if you don't do exactly as I tell you, you'll never see him again." All right, that'll bring us to the conclusion of chapter number 16. As always, thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you next time in chapter 17. God bless, and have a good one.